Hey, what's up? Welcome back. In this episode, you'll learn all about Turbo Streams. So this is Turbo. It is a tool that was built by the Rails team for using Hey. And this is sort of an extension of Turbo Links, which was like this older technology, which would sort of render things and swap out parts of the DOM instead of rendering the entire DOM. And so Turbo Links is basically like now going to be all inside of Turbo Rails. And so Turbo Rails exposes a couple different things. So you've got Turbo Drive, Turbo Frames, and Turbo Streams. And these are all sort of separate. And so what I wanted to do today was improve our blog application and use Turbo Streams to partially update parts of the page over a WebSocket connection. And this is super cool. Very fun stuff. And so there's a bit of installation here that we'll need to do. It does use NPM, so there's like a JavaScript component of this, so we will need to actually like import some stuff to get this working on the front end and also on the server. So at a high level, what we're going to try to do is make it so that when we update one of our blog posts, it will automatically update in the browser. So let's go over to our Rails application. So we've got this blog here that we've been working on. If you haven't been following along, there are several episodes on this channel where we go from 0 to 1 basically with all of this blog stuff. And so the first thing we need to do, according to the instructions here, is add the Turbo Rails gem. So we'll say bundle add, and then we'll say Turbo Rails. That'll install the Turbo Rails gem. And then we want to say Rails turbo install. And we'll see what this does. This gives us a couple different files here. So we're going to say Rails turbo install. So we're going to run this now because I didn't think this was actually modifying anything. I think just the turbo install is also doing the Redis bit. So right here, we are going to use Redis server as our backing store. Okay, so it did actually modify, it modified our gem file. So that's cool. All right, the next step is we actually want to go to application.js and import this Turbo Rails thing. So we'll go to application.js, and then, I don't know, somewhere here, I'll just import from @hotwired/turbo-rails. And then now that we've got all of that stuff installed, we can run our bin webpack dev server. So that's going to compile all of our front end stuff and get our front end web packing. All right, then let's split this vertically, and we'll also run Rails S from this same tab here, Rails server. So we've got our webpack stuff happening. We've got our Rails server up and running. And now we can go talk about the actual implementation here. So there's actually a bunch of different tools. There's a frames helper, a stream helper, and a tag builder, and this broadcastable concern. So when I was first checking out Turbo, I thought incorrectly, I thought that you needed Turbo Frames to work with Turbo Streams. Turns out that's not the case at all. You can use these Turbo Streams independent of Turbo Frames. And by defining a stream, you're sort of just going to listen for changes on the front end, or you kind of like hook up a stream where the front end can receive WebSocket notifications. And then those WebSocket notifications will target specific DOM elements by ID. So you don't actually need frames. You don't need anything else. You just need to have like the stream set up. So we'll take a look at that. So if we go into like our post show, so we have this show page where we're going to show like the title and description. In fact, if we pull this up and go to like posts/11 here. So at the very top here, we have the title of the post and the description, the actual content of the post, right? And right now, that's what lives here in this part of the show view. Now, one thing that I have seen is really common is breaking out all of the breaking out sort of the view pieces, the template pieces that are specific to instances of objects into partials. So we've already got a couple different partials here. We've got our likes button partial, the comments form, we've got a comment partial, but we don't have a post partial yet. So let's create a brand new partial here called _post.html.erb. And this post partial will just be this HTML here that shows the title and description. Okay, and then we're going to come back over here. We're going to say render at post. and that should render the post partial. So if we refresh our page, nothing should have changed, and that's correct. So this is like part one is sort of getting each of your pieces into partials. I think this is just a best practice too. You don't necessarily need to do this. The next thing I'm going to do is add a div with the ID equal to the DOM ID of @post. So what is this actually doing? So we're wrapping up our post partial. So this bit here, we're going to wrap that in a new div. So if we refresh the page here, okay, so now the content for our post partial is wrapped in a div, and you'll see this post underscore 11. That is the string value that was returned from DOM underscore ID for @post. So this DOM ID is going to give us a target, an ID that we can target on the front end, so that we can do things to this DOM ID with Turbo Streams. Okay, so all that we've done so far is just modify and set up our HTML so that it has this DOM ID wrapping up the partial. From here, the next thing we want to do is say Turbo Stream from @post, and this means like we want to like listen for any updates that are happening to @post as like a Turbo Stream right here. So if I refresh the page, you'll see this like Turbo Cable Stream source, and then it has a channel and it has like a bunch of stuff here. So this tag, this Turbo Cable Stream source tag, is going to use a little bit of JavaScript on the front end and is going to listen for things that are being published over the WebSocket. So if we look back at this Turbo Rails gem, we see this Streams helper, and inside of the Streams helper, this is like where we have our Turbo Stream tags. So Turbo Stream from, this is where this method comes in, and then we can pass in a bunch of streamables. I actually don't know what constitutes a streamable, but in my experience, this is just a bunch of like active record instances, active record objects, and then the attributes here allows you to specify like subparts of those models. So in our case, our streamable is just @post. So we've got Turbo Stream from @post. Now what we're going to do is in the Rails console, so if we go into log here, Rails console, is from the Rails console, we're going to modify the post. And then we're going to broadcast an update. And so broadcast is another part of Turbo. So that is inside of this Turbo Broadcastable. So the Broadcastable module is already mixed into active record models. So we don't actually need to like do anything fancy to add this into our model, but this broadcastable concern gives us a bunch of methods that we can call on the active record model, and that will just publish updates over that WebSocket. So let's take a look at what that looks like. So we've got our blog post here, testing with some comments. So we're going to say p is post.find11. And so this is the post that we're looking at in the browser. I'm actually going to make this. So on the right-hand side, we see the browser. On the left-hand side, we see Rails console. And so we're going to say p.title is equal to like modified in Rails console. Okay. So we are updating the post here directly. So I've updated the title in memory. Now I'm going to say p.save bang. That's going to save it in the database. Now, if I was to refresh this page, I would see that the title has changed to modified in Rails console. But what I want to do instead is I want to say p.broadcast update. And I believe this should update the UI over here. So if we hit enter, it did not. Okay. Oh, undefined method title for nil class. Okay. So this is interesting. So when we say broadcast update, it's trying to render that post HTML ERB template that we created earlier. And now it's saying undefined method title for nil class. So let's go take a look at that partial. And in this partial, you'll notice that we're still using the @post instance variable. Instead of using the instance variable, we want to use the local variable and assume that we're being passed in that local variable. So let's reload and try this again. P equals post find 11 p.broadcast update. Okay, boom. Did you see it update over here? We didn't actually refresh the browser, but it's updating in real time. So on the left, we've got rendered posts post HTML, and then we see this broadcasting to blah, 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 this giant HTML block. So this TurboStream tag here, this is where the magic is actually happening. So this is being sent over the WebSocket to our client, and our client is receiving this WebSocket notification, and it's deserializing this, and it's seeing like, okay, the action that we want to do is update. There's a few different actions you can do, like update, replace, append, prepend. So you can, there's a few different things you can do. In this case, what we wanted to do was update, so that we're modifying, we're just like updating this sort of partial part of the page. And you can see here the target is post_11. So it knew that the ID of the DOM element in the browser that we wanted to target was this DOM element. All right, next inside of the HTML, we see a template tag. Template tag, that is like a really common feature when you're working with like swapping out client-side code. And inside of the template tag is where we actually have the content of that post partial. So when we rendered this post partial, given P, this is the content that came out. So you can see the title says modified in Rails console. So if again we were to say like p.title is equal to testing again, p.save bang, p.broadcast update. Now right when I hit enter, we're looking right here. We want to see this modified in Rails console change. So I'm gonna hit enter, boom, testing again. You can see that updated over here without having to refresh. Now where this becomes really interesting is when we have a bunch of different browser tabs open, potentially, right? So we've got, let's say we've got 2 here now. Now we're gonna say p.title is another update to both browsers, p.save bang, p.broadcast update, boom. Now they both updated. So you're able to sort of like push out updates across all the different browsers that are listening for streams or for these turbo streams to come in. So that's really a really cool way to automatically sort of push updates to the browser. So this is an example of the update turbo stream. And in practice here, what we might do is actually go into the post model and say like, we can set up a hook that says after we save this post, let's broadcast an update so that this always happens. So there's a bunch of active record hooks that we can use. So we can say after update commit, we want to broadcast update. Now what this should do is make it so that when we reload the browser and just save the object. So now if we say like p is post.find11, p.title is test123, p.save bang. Now when we save it, that should cause an update to fire, and that will update the browser. So now we are updating, we're using those active record callbacks to automatically update the browser. So you could say like when we first create a post or update a post or whatever, we want it to automatically broadcast certain updates. So this is the basics of turbo streams. The next step though that you might be wondering is like, what happens if you are adding to a list? So in the comments example, right, like as we add comments, we want those to probably show up automatically. So let's take a look at that now. So the next version here that we wanted to play around with is comments. So if we jump out of this and we want to take a look at the the post show again. Okay, now inside of the comments section where we're rendering out the comments inside of the post show, under here, the first thing we need again is some element that we can target with our stream update. Similar to how we inserted the DOM ID here, we want to have some sort of DOM ID that we can target here. So I'm just going to make another div, and in this case, I'm just going to call or set the ID of the div to comments, and then I'm going to wrap all of the comments that are being rendered out by the comments partial inside of this div with ID comments. The next thing we want to do is add another turbo stream from. So turbo stream from. This time we're going to say at post, because we do want to listen to updates for the post, but in this case we want to target specifically the comments. So if there is an update to a specific comment, we want to be able to pipe that in here. So what we can do now is go into the Rails console again. So we'll refresh this page, and what we want to do is be able to create a new comment and have that appear in our list of comments. So let's see what this looks like. So if I say C equals comment.create for post ID 11 and user ID 9, and content is testing from console. Okay, so that gave us a new comment. So we have C, and we can say C.broadcast. And again, there's going to be, let's actually jump into C. So we're going to CD into C. I'm using pry-rails, the pry-rails gem here, so I can just like change directory into a specific object. Now I can do ls, and that shows me all of the methods on here. And so one thing that I'm looking for is broadcast. Here's all the broadcastable methods. So we've got broadcast in action, append later, before, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So what I think we want to do is we want to prepend to. We want to broadcast a prepend to, and then we're going to specify that we want to prepend it to the post's comments. So here we're going to say C.broadcast prepend to, and then we have to pass in the post object, because recall that like as part of our turbo stream from, we're listening on the post for updates about comments. So here we're going to say C.post. That'll give us the instance of the post. And then we can say comments here. And I believe this should update or prepend to our comments. So let's hit enter. We've got an undefined method likes for nil class. This is perfect. Okay, so if we go into the comments or the comment partial here, so we have a comments underscore comment.html.erb. Inside of this partial, we are rendering a like button. And that like button, so likes button partial, the likes button partial is accessing current user. So right now, when we are pushing Turbo Stream updates over WebSockets to all browsers, it's possible that each browser window that's opening, that's listening for updates, has a different current user. And so when we are trying to decide whether or not a current user has liked a specific post, like in order to render this like button, that is a user specific or user aware sort of feature. And so because we are accessing current user here, it doesn't know how to look up the current user, because when we're pushing from the server, there isn't really the context of a session. We don't have a logged in user. And so one way that you can get around this is by just making sure that there is a current user, and then otherwise just setting like to nil. So we could say like the like is equal to blah, 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 if current user, or if like current user is not nil. And what this will do is we'll just assume that we're only going to use this partial when we have a brand new comment. And so it won't matter whether or not the customer has actually liked it or the user has liked it. So let's try this again. So we'll say reload, and then C is comment.last, C.broadcast, prepend to, C.post. Okay, testing from console right there, boom. So we added a new comment. So let's add another comment here. C equals comment.create. Testing from console again. Okay, C.broadcast prepend to. So in this case, we're not updating the comment, right? We're prepending to a list of comments. So we're saying prepend to C.post comments. And so again, this is going to show up here right at the top of our comments. So we hit enter. Now we have another update here, right? If we wanted to show up at the very bottom, we could say append to instead of prepend. Append to. Now it's showing up at the bottom. The other thing that's weird is like you could keep broadcasting, and even though these are not different comments, they're the same comment, we just keep broadcasting updates. And so that's changing our UI, but it is not actually changing the database. So if we were to refresh this page, right, we've got this testing from console again 4 times right now. And if we refresh the page, we will only see it at the top, because this is only like this is the most recent comment. So what we can do now is similar to adding that hook to post.rb, right? Remember we did this after update commit hook. We can go to the comment and do an after create commit. we can say broadcast prepend to post comments, and we can save that. And now when we reload this, if we create a new comment, it should automatically broadcast. Okay, so let's say this comment is added from the terminal. Boom! This comment is added from the terminal. It's showing up here on the left. That's super fancy and fun, but watch this, right? So in the last episode, recall that we set up our Rails conductor, or we set up inbound emails so that we could automatically add replies to comments. So if we see like, what is like, this comment is comment 48. So we can go into to send a new inbound email from a user to comment 48. This is super cool because this comment is sent via email. And so suppose you have, again, multiple browsers open or multiple different users are watching this page, right? And we have this comment is being sent via email. And now we can say deliver inbound email. And you can see the comment is being sent via email is being appended here. Now, this is actually not where it should be, right? Like this should be appended as a reply. So if we were to refresh this page, it should show up as a reply down here. So we have not actually like set it up so that you can automatically render a reply. I'll leave that as an exercise for you to go figure out. And yeah, so this is a super fun little tool. This is using turbo streams again, and we are using some of the broadcast methods that are built into Active Record. There's only a handful, so you could really kind of go through and experiment with which ones you think make most sense. It kind of reminds me a little bit of jQuery too, where you could find an element and then say prepend to, append to, or update, or even replace. So I did run into a little bug with replace. It was actually replacing the entire DOM node, including the div that had the target ID. So if you tried to update it a second time, it wouldn't work because that was no longer in the DOM. So yeah, hopefully this is useful and interesting. I'm going to actually implement tic-tac-toe in the next episode with streams again, so that should be pretty fun. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.